seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Freedom Talk Radio 2013 Network, and you are listening to Surrounded by Idiots.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at sunsky.mysteries.com.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Well, good evening, everybody. Bill Zam here. Welcome to our Saturday night get-together, the Saturday night edition of Surrounded by Idiots. And we have a fabulous guest tonight who is not with us right now. So I'm going to wing it for a few minutes and wait for him to come up online. We spoke last night, so he is aware of the showtime. And we are just waiting for him now. For those of you in the rest of the country and around the world, we here in Michigan are having our first major snow event of the season. It is one that is affecting a great part of the country. It is expected to drop snow in a lot of different places around the country. You can see our local radar there. You can see the green patch there, surrounded by blue, is a little bit of rain with ice. So we are being hit with a lot of different kinds of weather. Farther south of us, I believe in Ohio, it is a turning into a rain event. Up here, we've got about 6 inches of snow. And I'm looking out the studio window right now, and it is still snowing rather heavily here. And they expect this to go on until 2 o'clock in the morning. And I know out where I used to live in western New York, they are getting probably pummeled with a major snow event. Out in western New York, we used to live in a little town called Alden, and that is in the snow belt. And all of the moisture comes right off of Lake Erie and dumps itself about 20 miles inland where we lived. So this time of the year, out in western New York, there's probably a good 3 or 4 feet on the ground by now, and this is just a bothersome flurry for them. Also, here in southeastern Michigan, in Saline, where we come from, where we are broadcasting from, the city of Saline, for the 10th year in a row, has been voted the best place to raise children in Michigan, and I believe it is in one of the top 5 in the entire country to raise children. And here in Saline, our city motto is, "We don't like your kind." In fact, I was up at the grocery store earlier today and ran into the mayor, and the mayor walked up to me and said, "You know what? We don't like your kind." And I looked at the mayor and I said, "We don't like your kind either." So we came to an agreement on that. In fact, Saline is so snooty that our Chamber of Commerce has an unlisted phone number. And I am doing right now what we call in the business stretching while we wait for our guest to arrive on the scene. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start the show, and we're going to talk about our guest and what he has going and what's going on. And hopefully we will be able to get together with him in the near future. I talked to him last night. He was out, and believe it or not, in the middle of the Mojave Desert, and he was having a difficult time with his cell phone reception, and he kept fading in and out, but we did have a rather pleasant conversation. And he has such a tremendous amount of information to impart upon us tonight. It is worth sticking around for the duration and trying to get a hold of him as we go through the show while I'm stretching here. And I see he is still offline. We use, to get our calls on the air, we use a service called Skype. And a lot of people consider it to be, the front door for the NSA and CIA and FBI and everything else and spying on us. But, they're spying on every damn thing that we do, so what's the point? So we use Skype to get the calls on the air. It works very well for that purpose. And you can see right there we have the show notes up on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and start the show. Here in Surrounded by Idiots, over the past actually, we're coming up on our 4th anniversary. Wow. Actually, we're past our 4th anniversary. We've been on the air for 4 years now. And we have had a wide range of guests. I've had a Star Trek actor on here by the name of Richard Mapes. He is a motivational speaker as well as a Star Trek actor. He is one of the guys that he's what us Star Trek fans call one of the red shirts. In the old Star Trek series with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and Dr. McCoy, the guy in the red shirt at the beginning of the show, that guy's going to die before the credits. That's what the red shirts do. So he wasn't one of the main stars. He was on every single different version of Star Trek, believe it or not. On every single one of them. He's one of the few actors that appeared in all of the different Star Trek television series. We've had physicists on. We had a physicist on, 2 physicists actually. One was a geophysicist and one was a theoretical physicist, which was a eye-bleeding, boring episode. I don't think anybody watched it or listened to it. I think that's probably one of the lowest watched shows on our YouTube channel, but the information he imparted is extremely interesting and critical because he had an encounter when he was a little kid with a UFO, and he worked out and is currently, after he became a well-respected physicist, exactly how the things work and what he believes, how they travel, and what he believes their method of propulsion is. And the last time I talked to him, he was looking for equipment that he could lease, borrow, or buy that he could actually measure the type of propulsion system that UFOs use. Haven't heard from him in a while. Probably I might get in contact with him and see how things are going. We have also had on our very first show and a few shows after that, the Cliff High, the inventor of the WebBot, the so-called WebBot. Those were some extremely interesting shows. We've had science fiction writers. In fact, the one science fiction writer that we had on, Corey Williams, he was on another show on the Freedom Talk Radio network earlier today, believe it or not. He was on The Truth Police with Tim and Andy, and that particular show is broadcasting still on the Blog Talk channel. We are sort of winding that down and winding up the Spreaker broadcast. Those of you that are on the audio side, you're probably listening to the Spreaker broadcast over at freedomtalkradio.net on the Bill Zam page. And we've had investigative reporters. We've had whistleblowers on. We have had candidates for federal office. We try to interview as many conservative Tea Party candidates as we can that are running for office to help them get some extra attention and hopefully help them get elected. We've had law enforcement representatives on. And in just the past few weeks, we've had the actual owner of the Ghost Mine out in California, I believe it is. And he is the one that came up with the TV series by the same name, Ghost Mine. It's a reality show. And that was a very interesting interview. And somebody that I was speaking to just before we came on the air, Mike Campbell, he has written an exhaustive, research-laden book about Amelia Earhart and what happened to her. And we have been talking the past couple of days about that. There is some new developments in that at some point I'll let you in on. And right now he is still arguing with some detractors. And I've been helping him out with that. And it's been kind of fun, actually. Pardon me, it's a private joke. I can't tell you about it on the air. So it only stands to reason that I asked tonight's guest to be on the show. Actually, he came to us and asked to be on the show, and I said, "Sure, that's what you're doing and what you're producing is very important." He's I have a friend of mine, a good friend. He's a former MUFON field investigator. He'd go out and take all the reports and everything from people that have seen unidentified flying objects. And he was one of the people, he sketches out what they saw and takes measurements and radioactive readings and atmospheric readings and collects samples of soil and trees and things like that. They do a very exhaustive type of investigation. And he was actually very excited that we were going to have our guest on, and hopefully Jeff is listening tonight. If not, he can listen to the archived broadcast of the show. And out west in the United States, there is one of the many mysteries that are out there, from the Lost Dutchman's Mine to various hauntings and other, I guess you'd call it paranormal events, is from Roswell to Area 51 and down into Mexico. It seems to be a real hot area for unidentified flying object sightings. Some of them are probably experimental planes flown by the military out of Area 51, but a lot of them are, in fact, unidentified. Here in Michigan, we also are a hotbed of UFO activity, especially in the thumb area of Michigan. If you look at the map of Michigan, it looks like a mitten, and the little thumb part of the mitten is a hotbed of UFO activity. It's amazing. Here in Michigan, people look up and go, yep, it's another UFO, and they go on about their business, having their barbecue or whatever. Now, all of these discussions brings to mind what we have discussed at length here on Surrounded by Idiots, and it deals with theoretical physics. We're talking about multiverses, brains, and UFOs traveling between brains, and that's not like the brain that's in your head. That is the brain between the separate universes would be the easiest way that I could explain it without totally screwing it up. It's the brains, think of them as window screens, and think of a series of window screens sitting on edge next to each other, going on into infinity. And the physicist that I know, the theoretical physicist, he believes that the UFOs pop out of our brain and travel between brains, which is why they appear to move almost instantaneously from one spot to another, because they're basically popping out of our existence and then popping back in another spot. That is his theory. And multiple realities, essentially, is what we're talking about. And our guest, let me see if he is, in fact, available as yet. And I see he is still offline, and his cell phone is also not working. So it could very well be that there is something going on out there in California that is affecting our connection between each other. So I'm going to tell you about the guy. His name is Chad C. Meek. He is the nephew. His uncle was a fellow by the name of George Van Tassel. George Van Tassel, if you've never heard of him, had many personal encounters with UFOs out in the western United States, specifically at a place called Big Rock. And let me see here. Giant Rock, I'm sorry. Let me bring up a page that has photos of Giant Rock. There's Giant Rock right there. It looks like a big boulder until you look at that right there. That is a person. That is an extremely large rock. It is, in fact, 7 stories tall. It is considered by many people to be the largest freestanding boulder in the world. So one has to ask themselves, how the heck is something like that made? That is a big, big rock. Obviously not deposited there by a glacier, although I suppose it could be. But It's a big rock. Obviously, it probably came off of a mountain or something. I don't know the geology of it. But that seems to be, the way I think of it, is it's probably off of a glacier or something like that. His uncle, George Van Tassel, wrote a book called The Council of Seven Lights. I have a copy of it right here, and I must say it is a extremely interesting book that this man wrote. He wrote it many years ago. I'm not sure the actual date that it was published on, but let me show you the copy of the book that I have. I got it as a PDF file after the show when I published the show notes, and they are up at ussamichigan.com in the show archives. There will be a link so that you can download a copy of this book called, The Council of Seven Lights by George Van Tassel. And in this, he talks about not only God and Jesus from a Christian point of view, but also what we would consider UFOs. And it puts forth a very, very intriguing concept that God created all of us and all of the universe and the other humans on other planets. The guy comes right out and says it, which is very interesting. He says that this is what the aliens told him during their encounters. Apparently, he actually met these people, and this is what he came away with, which I found to be extraordinary, to be honest with you, that he wrote this. And, I read just about every book that comes out, and I am pretty well versed with a lot of older books regarding physics, UFOs, religion, but I've never heard of this book. And this is a fabulously interesting book. It's called the Council of Seven Lights. And I have a page here that I have highlighted right here that I thought was very interesting. And we'll wait for it to come up on the screen for those of you on the video side at ussamichigan.com. If you want to watch, if you're listening on the audio side and are at a desktop computer, you can go ahead and go over to ussamichigan.com and click on the video link up in the upper right-hand corner of the page, and you can see what is on the screen. Okay, it has finally caught up to what I'm saying. They... in the book, here, let me get this out of the way here. That is why you have an earthly, dense animal body and an inner body created reality as God made you. They truly created men and women of the Adamic race of man. It's very interesting that he puts it that way. Have this civilization from Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction, of humans has expanded the science of destruction to the point of crisis. And apparently that's why the aliens contacted Van Tassel. I don't know if he was particularly receptive to it, or it was because he just happened to be there at Giant Rock when they decided to flit down in their UFOs and have a conversation with somebody. But this part that I've highlighted is what I think to be the most interesting part of the book that I have read so far. The Adamic race of man has brought nullifier ships into the Earth's thin film of breathable atmosphere. We call them green fireballs. They have nullified concentration of atomic radiation that were in our atmosphere, which is very interesting because the physicist that we had on talking about UFOs said something extremely similar to that, and he came up with that himself. I do not believe that he has read this book from what I can understand with my conversations with him. Here's the interesting part. They feel responsible for the fact that one of their people started this destructive cycle on the Earth. You have a choice to make. You either accept the Creator's Adamic constructive part of you, or you recognize the physical, human destructive influence of the Eve ancestry. The Adamic race of man typifies the combination of spirit and substance into form. It's pretty good, even if it's not true. That's a pretty good take on things. And they feel responsible for the fact that one of their people started this destructive cycle on Earth. They're talking about atomic weapons, which leads me to ask the question that I have in the little note box in this document. Are we to assume then that either Oppenheimer or Einstein were in fact aliens? Is that that's what I take away from it, at any rate. One of the things that Van Tassel said, if we go back to my show notes here, and I'm still waiting for our guest to pop up online. Let me check one more time to see if he is available. And I may mute the volume and see if I can get a hold of him via his phone. But I will wait just a few minutes while I finish explaining this part, because I don't want to lose my train of thought when we get a hold of him. The things that Van Tassel said, and there is a video of his, an interview with him that appeared on television back in the 1960s. There is the image of the film. There is a video at Examiner.com, and it's called "Historic Interview Reveals Government Secrets Learned from Extraterrestrials." Story that we've heard many, many times before by many, many different conspiracy theorists. And it appears that Van Tassel may have been the originator of it, and sounds like he's the real deal. I don't think he was crazy as a loon. Anyway, and at any rate, some of the statements that he made that I've put into my notes here is that aliens walk among us. And my questions are, who are they? And here's the big question. Are they in positions of power? Why are they here? What do they do while they're here? And do they breed with humans? I think those are very interesting things, because if we go back to his book, Van Tassel's book, and where he talks about there are many Adamic races of man that God created throughout the universe, it would stand to reason that they are the same as humans, have the same DNA and everything, and be essentially genetically identical, which also goes with a lot of the different conspiracy theories about aliens, that especially the reptilians. But it doesn't appear that these people are reptilians. It appears that they are actually another branch of humanity from another planet, according to Van Tassel, which is extraordinarily interesting, I think. The more I read about this, the more intrigued I get. And my question is if they are identical to us, and you can't tell the difference, are they in positions of power, either here in the United States or around the world? I think that is maybe a very, very critical question, a linchpin of something that we have to ask ourselves if this is true. And a lot of these theories, and you call them conspiracy theories if you want, but essentially they're theories, that you have to consider all of the aspects of them, because what if one part of it is true, and they actually are here, and what if they are in positions of power? I don't think they are, because of what they supposedly told Tassel, that they're here to essentially save us because one of their own has started the destructive cycle on Earth, namely the nuclear weapons. Now, let me see if anything is here. Nope. I am checking various parts of our our broadcast. And I suppose what I'm going to do right now is I am going to mute the audio portion of the show and see if I can get a hold of our guest. So I'm going to click on that. And over here on the audio side of the broadcast, I am going to lower the volume. I'll be back momentarily. And believe it or not, I am back without the guest. It appears that there has been some type of extremely tragic circumstance that has forced him to be offline. I know he is staying in Las Vegas right now. He is at his hotel. Neither his cell phone nor his Skype are working right now. So who's to say what the issue is? I don't think he's upset because we've had a very pleasant email exchange all day today. It has been very interesting, to say the least, having my conversations with him. Actually, you know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to show you what the control room looks like in our new broadcast studio, the service that we're using. It's a company called Spreaker. A lot of people have heard of them. And that is what our control room looks like. It's you can see we are on the air. There's a little bit of information on there. You can see I'm using a microphone, oddly enough. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to hear me. You can see the little speaker, the little volume controls over there and everything. And it's recording what I'm saying. And it will. The interesting thing about Spreaker is as soon as I'm done, it will upload this to YouTube and the podcast as well. And it will upload them both automatically. And as soon as I go on the air, it puts out a tweet. It says something on Facebook about it, and it does all of this stuff pretty automatically. And the reason why we're going with this is from a standpoint of running a network, because Andy Peacher and I are partners, and he owns the Freedom Talk Radio Network, and I own Selene Entertainment Television Group, LLC. I handle the technical side of things, and he handles the people side of things, and it works out pretty good that way. We have a very good relationship, and we talk often, and that's one of the cool things about Skype, folks, is that he's on the other side of the planet. He's in the UK. He's on the other side of the planet, and we talk to each other like we're sitting in the same room all the time. It's modern technology is amazing in that way. But at any rate, we decided to stop, to ease back on our Blog Talk broadcasts, simply because Blog Talk lets you broadcast 2 hours a day, and that's it. You're done. Then you can do 2 hours tomorrow, and after that, you're done. Spreaker allows us to broadcast 3-hour shows 24 hours a day. So all you have to do is turn off the broadcaster. The next DJ or show host loads up the control panel that you see right there and clicks go on the air, and they go on the air. So we can go 24 hours a day if we have enough hosts. And I know we have several hosts that, there's conflicting schedules. A lot of people, I would imagine there's probably more than just myself that wants to broadcast on Saturday. I mean, Andy and Tim Spearman, they do the Truth Police on Saturday afternoon, which means that if I wanted to stay on Blog Talk, I couldn't do this show on Saturdays. And doing it during the week is just, it's too much of a grind on me, given my medical condition and everything else. So we are going with Spreaker. We have a Shoutcast server as well, but that's kind of tricky to work with given the control panel and everything they have for you online to use, and a lot of our hosts are having trouble. I'm not going to say grasping the technical side of it, but getting their computer to connect to the Shoutcast server correctly. There are some issues with that, and that's just the way it is. So we're going to go with Spreaker because it has an online studio. Getting back to the subject at hand, Chad Meek, the fellow that we're supposed to have on, and I'm just going to keep muttering into the microphone in the hopes that he becomes available and we can extend the show. As a matter of fact, I can do up to 3 hours, so we might be on until 8 o'clock tonight as opposed to 7 o'clock. At any rate, Chad, he started out in energy and mining, and he's a let's see, I think a fourth-generation Californian. His family's been in California for at least 4 generations. So he is in energy and mining, and he's also done some work in renewable energy, which is also another subject that I want to talk to him about because I do a lot of alternative energy stuff myself. In fact, the way I light 2 of the rooms in our house, believe it or not, is with solar lighting, and we have no solar panels outside. I have obtained some solar floodlights. They are LED floodlights. They run off of a little solar panel and rechargeable AA batteries. And the little solar panel has a switch on it. It's like a wall switch that you can turn on and off. And in one of the bathrooms upstairs, I have these solar spotlights, and it lights up the room brighter than the regular lighting strip does. So I use that in that room. I never turn on the lights in there. And in our bedroom, I have the solar pathway lights. You've seen them around houses. You probably got some yourself. They cost a couple bucks a piece. They little solar pathway lights. They light up as soon as it goes dark, and then they go dead around midnight. And that's because of the way they're manufactured. What I do is I have a bunch of these things, and I have the bottoms of them, the clear part that reflects the light. I have those taken off, and I have my own reflectors that turns them into table lights. So I've got these solar lights. I put them out in the sun and charge them, or I use a battery charger and charge the batteries in them, and then I pop them on the table lamps that I have built for them, and they light up the bedroom, and it's amazing. They probably 4 or 5 times as bright as a nightlight, bright enough to read by. I read by them, and Chad is has been involved in renewable energy. He has worked in the Honduras and Bosnia. He's worked in Alaska in pursuit of his dreams and what he does. Now, the interesting thing here is, and the reason why he is supposed to be on the show, is that he has come up with a movie called Giant Rock, the movie, about the giant rock out in California. And the history, I suppose I should get into the history of the giant rock. That area, for the Hopi Indians, was a very spiritual area. The Hopi Indians were aware of that area as well as other Native Americans, and for them it was a very spiritual area, which is odd since it's also a hotbed of UFO activity. And there was a guy, a German guy. His name was Frank Kritzer, Kritzer, Frank Kritzer. He was a German immigrant, and he moved out there for the purpose of mining, and he found the giant rock right there, 7 stories tall. And what he did was, and this is bizarre that he thought of it and made people think that he was crazy, and maybe he was, he built a house under there, right there. He built a living area underneath the giant rock, which would For me, that would make me a little bit paranoid, having that giant thing sitting over my head all the time, wondering if it's going to fall on top of me. But at any rate, he built a living area underneath there. And Kritzer met a pilot who his name was George Van Tassel. That is the uncle of the fellow that's supposed to be on the show, Chad Meek, Mr. Van Tassel, George Van Tassel. He apparently was a high school dropout. Aha. Hold on one moment. Our guest is here. And I was exactly correct. Our guest is now arrived on the scene. Good evening, Chad. How are you doing? Testing 1, 2, 3. And I don't hear the guest as yet. We are waiting for him, his voice to come up.
Hello.
Chad, how are you?
Doing good, Bill. How are you?
Excellent. We're about a half an hour into the show, and I have been talking about physics and multiverses and brains and Einstein and Oppenheimer and George Van Tassel.
Ah, good. Great. There's a lot of headspace in there.
I've been doing for the past half hour what we call stretching.
Stretching.
Yeah, I've been stretching.
You've been stretching.
Yes, I have. All over the place.
Good for you.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you're here, and hopefully everything is going okay out in California where you are. We are in the midst of a rather severe snowstorm out here in the east, as I'm sure you've heard.
Yeah. You got some nasty weather there, so yeah.
Yeah. But I had actually just gotten to the part on the show where I was talking about your experiences. You're fourth generation Californian, and you've been in mining, energy, and renewable energy as well.
Yes. I've been in all those. I actually, for some odd reason, I left California in 1979, moved to Denver, and the reason being was during that time period I was watching all my friends go to jail for various reasons, mainly drunk driving and whatever. I thought I needed to get a little bit of distance away from them and the California environment, and so I read a book. Well, actually, there were two things. I read a book called Centennial by James Michener, and I just loved how he did that, and so I became just enamored. I didn't know anybody out there, and the other is I went to a psychic, and she had told me that I would, and this is an interesting part of even quantum physics, but she told me I would move to Colorado within about 4 months, and that I would be married within another 4 months, and that I would go into the oil and gas business, and I never even thought about it. And it just so happened is I did all that. And my next door neighbor worked for a company called City Service, mm-hmm. which was an oil and gas company out in the Midwest. And he said, "Do you want to you want to start an oil and gas company?" I go, "Okay." I guess I had another one of my mini Forrest Gump moments. I said, "Well, okay, it sounds good." So anyways, that's how I got into it. I partnered up with him. And incidentally, after 6 months, he said, "I can't take being in business, as an entrepreneur." He says, "I'm going back to City Service." And I go, "Well, that's sure great." And so I was left with the business, and within a few years, I was doing pretty well. And so I spent a lot of pretty much 20 years, running oil and gas companies, engineering fairly large projects, held the record for the amount of oil and gas wells drilled in the state of Nevada, made discoveries, made a lot of bucks, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so that started the whole shebang. That's the story behind that. As far as that, I was going to college. It was a political science, thinking I was going to be a lawyer. and my life changed dramatically. So
got from a lawyer to an oil driller.
Oil driller, yeah,
that's
getting my hands dirty. I had 50 employees, 3 drilling rigs. I was young and really adventurous, and pretty bold young guy, very dynamic as far as that. So I did that, and then through that, we ventured into various mining. We held huge acreage positions in Alaska, and we went international in Bosnia and in Honduras, and done that stuff. So that was pretty much my life, going forward up and then I thought, well, I need to do something for the environment. And of course, I grew up with the legendary George Van Tassel, or near him, which he had a lot of peculiar ideas, of which one of them was that we didn't need gasoline to drive, and he was telling me that actually in the 70s. He goes, we don't need that. He says, I talked to these space people and about free energy and how to do this and what have you, and he says we don't need it. He says we don't need it. And but there was a kind of very 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 interesting conversation I've had as a very young man as far as not only renewable but free energy, and how things really worked in the in the universe as far as that, and how UFOs travel. They essentially create their own energy. And they move around they essentially create their own space that allow them to be in an anti-gravity type mode. And so they, instead of having to burn something, which is the formal thing of thermodynamics, it was completely unnecessary. So he had a lot of really great novel ideas. It's just funny, and I'd be hearing these out in the middle of the desert. That was the odd thing about it. I mean, it was very eclectic, and some of the people. My uncle had a restaurant and a landing strip out there, and so we would see and talk to a lot of very interesting. One of the peculiar thing is I've never been able to shake my uncle and his influence. I've traveled all the world, and I'd always run into somebody who knew him. And it didn't matter where. I was in Serbia, speaking with some scientists over there, and they knew my uncle well. They're one thing in common: they were both followers of Nikola Tesla. And so they're telling me stuff about my uncle. I went to New Zealand, ran into Bruce Cathy. He's written several books on free energy and things like that. I ran into him at an airport. I was pitching an oil and gas deal at Morton Thiokol to a bunch of rocket scientists, and this one guy started asking me questions where I came from, where I lived, and just would not give up. And he said, well, I finally told him, I said, well, I grew up near this 8-story giant rock out in Landers. And he goes, yeah, I knew George Van Tassel. I said, yeah, he's my uncle. And of course, the whole subject matter of me selling an oil and gas deal stopped, and we got into in a conference room at Morton Thiokol with a bunch of scientists talking about free energy. I didn't sell the deal. So,
that has to have been a very bizarre circumstance. You're there to sell something to a rocket company, and you wind up talking about UFOs and a giant rock in a conference room.
Right.
It's going to be surreal.
The one guy was very interesting because he kept on asking all these very probative questions, and it was just it felt uncomfortable because I didn't know where he was getting the information. Like, it started off like this: is, well, where are you from? Well, I'm from California. Well, where in California? Well, Southern California. No, where in Southern California? I said, well, a place near Palm Springs. He says, really? Where near Palm Springs? I said, well, it's near a town called Yucca Valley, and the town's actually Landers, but it's unincorporated. And so anyway, so he just would not give up. It was like he saw something in it and what have you. And it was a great conversation, a material waste of time, but very illuminating, because he ended the conversation by saying, he says, I got to tell you something about your uncle. He was the most inspirational man. I wouldn't be doing this had I not known him, which was pretty good. The other thing is I had I've always ran along with it. We've done public companies and things like that, and I ran into a guy who became a director, and he actually handled the North American Toyota account. Worked for a big Madison Avenue firm, and he was a director, and he would tell me that he used to set his clock at I think it was around 1 o'clock, so he could wake up when he was a teenager, so he could listen to the Long John Neville radio show, where my uncle would appear regularly with Jackie Gleason and all these other celebrities and talk about UFOs and things like that. So fascinating in respect to the amount of people that I would serendipitously or for whatever reason, begin a conversation. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So I've been dealing with that. I remember also too, growing up in in Southern California. We're the same age, so we were kind of I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you were in Catholic school 24/7 and never did a bad thing in your life. But me and my friends, we'd be sitting around watching TV, and and the Twilight Zone would come on, and then another show like Discovery Sunday. My uncle was on a couple hundred of these shows, and my uncle would appear, and I wouldn't say, my friends would say, dude, cool, blah blah, but man, this guy, and I wouldn't tell him, because I didn't want to bring up the conversation of UFOs or anything like that, because it's very personal to me. So I've had a lot of interesting experience. I would say, yeah, he's really cool. I wouldn't even tell him that he was my uncle. So it wasn't that I wasn't embarrassed. It was that I was fighting so incredibly hard to be portrayed as a normal person walking around with some of these experiences. I got married fairly young, and I wouldn't tell my wife for about 3 years about any of these things for fear of her running off. And so I finally got the courage, and I mentioned this to her, and so anyway, she was understanding, and of course she's been with me for 33 years, so obviously I didn't freak her out too bad. So yeah.
That's I had my first UFO experience when I was in high school, not a Catholic school. I only spent 4 years in Catholic school. That's the time I spent out in the real world. And that was a hell of an experience, I have to tell you that right now. Thankfully, it's getting dark outside here, so I can't see the snow coming down still.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I was out in it a little bit earlier today. It's brutal out there.
Oh man.
Yeah, first big one of the year. It's one of those things. Now, your movie, the movie that you're making, it's called Giant Rock the Movie, and you've started a holding company that is doing this movie.
Well, actually, I've been president of this. In fact, it's the remnants of I became president of a company called Clarity Resources in 1988, and again, we did all kinds of drilling and all that stuff. And in the precursor to that, I had a private company that I ran, pretty much through the early 80s up through there. Anyways, we merged the two companies together. I became the president CEO. Anyways, I'm still president CEO of this company, and we have some various, we still have some mineral properties and some things there. But what we did was we kind of reinvented ourselves a couple of times. One of which is with, we created Giant Rock Universal specifically, which is our subsidiary company, to produce a feature film, Giant Rock the Movie. And again, what it is it's an epic feature film that really goes from 1930 to 1963. It's actually 3 parts. I've got the first one. I wrote the screenplay, and wrote half of the second sequel. And so now we're in, I guess we're called the pre-production, and what we're doing is we built trailers and websites and things like that. And so now we're going through the whole recapitalization of the company to get the $30 million that we put together our budget to do it. And this isn't I mean, it's not a lot of money in Hollywood terms. The way I spend money, it's a we will extrapolate from $30 million, probably around $60 or $70 million worth of production value, because that's pretty much what I've always done. I've always been able to keep things under budget, get it done, cut through all the BS and all, what somebody else is telling me it has to be done. I've had a real knack for that. I've always kept people's feet to the fire, especially when it comes to money, just the way it is. But yeah, it's going to be $30 million. We've currently attached Chris Christopherson. He signed a letter of intent to play one of my uncle's protagonists, and the character's name's Tom Sharp. He's the leader of a group called COINTELPRO, which actually was in existence, and actually tried to literally destroy my uncle. They, at the time, and of course we're going back a few years through that whole 40s and 50s, the government did not like people stating that they had contact with extraterrestrials and or sightings. They were very, very draconian, and for the most part did everything they could to literally destroy people who had claimed that they had experienced UFO or extraterrestrial. And my uncle, who was a very vocal and very visible person, regarding this information, he believed that everyone should know that we weren't alone in the universe. He just thought it was ridiculous. And through his communication with some of these extraterrestrials in vis-a-vis ways, some in channel, some in direct contact, there was various forms how he actually had done it. Incidentally, he called it a tensor beam. And what his thing was, when trying to describe it to a reporter as far as what he did, he says, well, it's almost like a TV channel. I turn the channel in my mind, and they're able to imprint things in my brain through these sessions down inside the rock, that was carved out down there. And you get all this information, one of which was that above ground nuclear testing had to be stopped immediately, that it was not only destroying our world, but destroying these parallel universes that my uncle knew nothing about, which so many, various theologians and some philosophers and scientists have always claimed that they're creating a tear in there, and they had to be stopped. Well, lo and behold, he said that vocally, and this is, of course, during the 50s. We were in the Cold War with Russia, and there's all kinds of intrigue going on, and he was living in the United States, so they did not like that at all. I mean, they simply didn't. So they went after him, but there actually was a group that was formed to destroy people, and what it literally came after that, he was in contact with Eisenhower, both Dwight Eisenhower and Amy Eisenhower, about the UFO thing, and then eventually they switched off, and COINTEL got to the president, and which COINTEL, I believe, was part of the military-industrial complex, but they got to him, and all of a sudden, my uncle was put on Eisenhower's most dangerous persons list, which we got a guy who's saying, wait, don't do above ground nuclear test, and going to, hey, I am being accused of all kinds of things. So now my uncle was no saint by any means. I mean, he was a womanizer. I mean, he loved. I mean, if you were a female, to the dismay of my family and what have you, he liked you. I mean, so he was all man when it came to that. But, having said that, it takes nothing away from what he was saying and the message that he was, telling, which was really quite cogent, very important, which was a very important message. And people gathered around him. In fact, every year for over 25 years, there were these UFO space conventions out in the middle of the desert, and literally over over 10,000 people would show up every year from all over. And I would, as a little kid, I would open my. We would live with my grandma. We were living with our grandmother who lived out there. I'd open my back window, and there'd be 10,000 people out there from seeing more, maybe less than 20 or 30 people in a given month, to seeing 10,000 people out in the middle of nowhere with little stands selling books, giving speeches, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a very eclectic time period. One thing I thought was interesting is he was a very smart man. He was a flight engineer for Howard Hughes for years. Knew him well. Howard Hughes actually gave him money for my uncle's one of his experiments, which was called the Integratron, which is a rejuvenation machine, cell rejuvenation machine, that actually has a lot of very interesting properties. So it wasn't like my uncle was. He was this a very interesting person, because the likes of L. Ron Hubbard, Jack Parsons of the who was the founder of the Jet Propulsion Laboratories, they would all sneak out there to listen to him. And of course, L. Ron Hubbard created a religion called Scientology and things like that. A lot of the yogis would come out and listen to him and what have you. But I guess a special thing, I was told I was eating, my uncle had a restaurant out there, and I was eating at a very close proximity to Howard Hughes while he was drinking coffee. He'd always fly his plane out there because there was a dry lake, and he liked to get out of L.A., and he'd come out there, and I was told that I was sitting near him. I don't recall it, but we'd have an eclectic group out there at all times. Also, we would have military planes and military helicopters show up out there and land out on the dry lake. And I was always intrigued. I didn't find out till later what they were doing there. And as it turns out, during that time period, there was a lot of interconnection between the pilots and the UFO, and their lives would turn upside down. Because everything that they had believed up until that point was, became suspect. They couldn't figure out how they were, waving the flag, saluting their officers, flying around, killing the enemy, the perceived enemy, et cetera, et cetera. And then they see these discs out there. And so it turns their worlds upside down. And they would have a lot of these guys would have a hard time functioning because they could not, reintegrate that into their lives. And so the only place, there's nowhere for them to go during that time period. If they talked to a psychologist, they would be out of their careers. They talked to their superiors, they would be automatically, ramped out. And this actually both occurred on the commercial end and in the military end, which, so they had nowhere to go. And so there was some very, very, trying times. So they would somehow find out who they could talk to and who would explain what they were seeing. And it happened to be my uncle. So I would wonder, well, why is this helicopter landing out there? What is this plane doing out there? What are these military guys, almost kind of an X-Men fashion? What are they doing out there? Well, I found out later that he was actually counseling them and telling them what they were seeing and kind of bringing them back to Earth. So this is the story. Giant Rock, the movie, it's an epic. It actually starts in 1930, even before my uncle, which is, it's funny, I bring up James Michener and Centennial, which is, this is an epic feature UFO thriller, but it starts primarily in 1930 with a German immigrant named Frank Kreitzer, who went out there out in the middle through a vision, was told to go out there and look for minerals. Well, he did. At the first stop, he met my uncle in Santa Monica, and my uncle grub-staked him and kept in contact. And then it was right in 1941, the local authorities were suspicious of this German immigrant who spoke in broken English. and who actually he was mining for rare earth minerals, and so they went out there, and Frank Kreitzer was very paranoid and would not come out of the rock, so they threw tear gas canisters down there to get him out. Well, he stored his dynamite and nitroglycerin down there, and so he was literally eviscerated through an explosion that ignited this, and so Frank Kreitzer was killed. But during the time period from 1930 to 41, he had talked, he'd kept in communication because my uncle essentially grub staked him, with various, food, equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Well, anyways, my uncle was still working in the aerospace industry. What he did is around 1947, he'd been going out there. So in 1947, he took the whole family out there. So we take all these incidents, and most of them, there is some dramatic license, but most of them are pretty close to what actually happened during that time period. I've taken it to 63, and then we go in the second part. We go from 63 up to about 2001, and it's really designed for a 3. So George Lucas ain't got nothing on me. So, I've got Star Wars 1, 2, and 3 here. But
you're going to do it in the correct order too, aren't you?
Huh?
You're going to do it in the correct order too, aren't you?
Absolutely. I'm not going to work backwards. Yeah.
That's this is. I find all of this astounding. There's Howard Hughes and your uncle. And UFOs are obviously involved, and there's military guys landing out there, and they're talking about the UFOs. I'm just absolutely so curious to find out what Howard Hughes thought about all of this UFO stuff. The guy was the world's most eccentric person, and Hughes has always been a hero of mine, just simply because of what he was able to accomplish. So what do you know about Howard Hughes and his involvement in all of this, other than just being a friend of your uncle's?
Right. No, he had his own experiences. He claimed to have had 4 of them, 4 direct contact, not physically with the ETs, but he actually had with ships while he was flying, and so he was forever trying to chase them and catch up. So it was twofold. One, he was on he was a technology wizard, and so all of this, and of course he was also too highly connected to the Central Intelligence Agencies. Howard Hughes was. So as far as all the transfers and things like that, I think he had a working knowledge of them, anyways, and that was part of the resentment of the government and my uncle, because they want, my uncle was more universal versus, granted he loved this country and he worked in aerospace, but he had actually gone past that. He said, hey, this world is not just about the red, white, and blue and USA and us being this. And I think that's kind of what hit him. But Howard Hughes, the stuff that he would come up with, he was always interested in technology and information. He was brilliant. So obviously it fit right in the whole, in the whole world of Howard Hughes, where he lived, what he was doing. As far as that, he was, my gosh, he figured out how to pick up a wrecked nuclear submarine. He could divine, it's just incredible. The list goes on as far, and satellites, telecommunication. We would not have satellites pretty much if it wasn't for Howard Hughes and some of his medical research. They all fit. In fact, my uncle with the rejuvenation machine, it was really designed, and it's still actually out there. There's still a white dome, and all of Hollywood celebrities go out there from you name it. In fact, Anthony Bourdain, the food guy, he did a show out there recently, but Jay Leno was out there. Charlize Theron, she was out there and would take these sound baths, and everyone would feel better being inside of this dome that was made out of that was designed pretty much like Moses' temple and things like that. So the innovation, I mean, some of this stuff sounds almost, it's like the visitors from Mars and, and what have you. But some of these ideas, and the dome was actually funded by Howard Hughes. So they were all actually in the same club. They were looking for innovation, technologies, better ways to do things. They were all innovators. And what was he thinking? Well, here's this guy that he knew that actually worked for him that communicated and came up with some really neat, nifty ideas on how things worked. And Howard Hughes was no fool. And if you were near him, then you must have had something that he wanted. And so that's what it comes back to the whole time. But yeah, he did have 4 different sightings and was extraordinarily interested. Again, he was in the intelligence agencies, almost back pocket looking for these things. So he actually had an inside track. And my uncle and some of the group that he was in, they were like this, there was all these competing interests out there. Of course, there's the Russians, and then but then you have all of these intelligence agencies from COINTEL to FBI to this that are all vying for these. I don't know. I guess maybe they're looking for something like the Philosopher's Stone or something. The way to talk to the universe or whatever. But Howard Hughes was in that. He was an intricate player. So I've always been fascinated by him too. I loved how he stood. Howard Hughes stood up against the government. And my uncle was the same way. He was this kind of maverick. John McCain claims he's a maverick, but I haven't seen too many mavericks until some of these guys in the 50s and the 40s that were out there that were innovating and doing things light years ahead of their time. So yeah, I agree with you. One of my all-time favorites is Howard Hughes and his contribution to this world. So yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question. And this is going to require conjecture on your part, but your uncle, he was, you said he was basically like flipping a switch or going into a different room in his brain and being able to communicate with the other beings. And I'm wondering if Howard Hughes might have had that type of ability as well. And it actually makes some kind of sense when you consider how, mentally unhinged he became later in life. That it may have affected him in some way. It makes sense because he came up with all of these innovative ideas that nobody else had thought of.
You might have something there, and again, it's only conjecture, but obviously, it's like, okay, like for instance, these were not degreed like my uncle. I mean, these were self-developed, self-educated men on so many different ways, including, of course, Howard Hughes. And they just, so they went out and did things. Where did these ideas get? And I think that this is again conjecture. I think that there are certain people that are chosen for various reasons to receive various things at given times. I think it's kind of this prime directive to not interfere, but to kind of move forward. And I just think that there are, and obviously money was never an issue with Howard Hughes, and with my uncle, he never had a lot of money either. But money was the last thing that he even cared about. As far as he was not after the money. I've gone back and going back to his nonprofit. I mean, heck, some of the stuff that's in the public domain, people can just go on the internet and get it. None of the stuff was protected. It was like he was trying to inspire people to do stuff, and that was my uncle and Howard Hughes, is to get outside of themselves and to do something. So when you get past the greed, and I think if you're looking in the world of a prime directive and in various people that are watching that want to help us move forward but don't want to destroy the world, I think that probably makes sense. And I think that, when you talk about Oppenheimer and the nuclear weapon and things like that, I think, in fact, he literally, Oppenheimer lost his mind by releasing the the tools to destroy the world, 10,000 times over. Oppenheimer, he literally had mental. He was in such severe depression. They were worried about Oppenheimer. If you get any of his background, he wanted to kill himself. He thought he'd just. So some of this stuff is, again, it's pure conjecture. Some of the stuff, it makes incredible sense as far as, in retrospect, as far as why they were getting this stuff. Okay, and who, so they always say, many are called, but few are chosen. And I think, and that's actually a prevailing thing even with my uncle. He's kind of like one of the themes that goes in the movie is, reluctant Messiah. George and even Frank Kreitzer, they were just kind of doing what they thought they were being told to do. And they were reluctantly to do it. There was a big, brouhaha within our family about George and what he knew and what he was doing, et cetera, because Eva was my aunt. So there was definite conflict as far as with some of the stuff. But when we get into what he wanted to do and some of the things he wrote, he says people are going to claim that I'm a nut. He says I'm a flight engineer. I'm a guy. And he says now I get messages from from the Brotherhood up there to do this, and this. He says I don't want to do this. And actually, in fact, on one of his in his eulogy, he had put together that he literally says why me? Why do I have to do this? They'll laugh at me. And then he would be getting back informations from these voices and what have you. Says, no, you go. You don't argue. You go. You do this. And but he literally kind of fought the same way. So that's a big thing between a lot, and even Frank Kreitzer. Frank Kreitzer was a German. He came before my uncle. He was a German immigrant. He was told to go out in the middle of the desert and look for earth metals and to wait further instructions. And it turns out that where he carved out the inside, and it was a wonderful living space, where he carved out the inside of the rock, it was the perfect temperature 365 days a year. It was warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And out in the high desert, it'll get up to 105, 110. Well, the temperature would be in the high 60s during the heat of the day. So everyone was perplexed as far as where all these people, where did he learn that? Where did he learn to do everything with such precision? And actually, there's still pictures out there where it was a very livable place inside of a boulder. Okay, I mean, you talk about it. I mean, for the day, you talk about innovation to go out in the middle of the Mojave Desert and find at the time they call it the large stone, and go out there and carve a very livable place. I used to go down there as a child. There's a piano down there. I used to play piano. It was a very animated place. As I got older, I stopped liking to go down there by myself because I would feel like the place would almost illuminate, with very crystalline structures. It had a life and a vibration of its own. Anyways, I guess I hope I didn't get off track, and I hope I kind of get a little bit of explanation as far as what was behind the motives of some of these people. It was not fame or fortune.
Yeah, well, I'm on the video side of the show. I actually found a website with some photographs of the living area underneath there, and also photographs of the conventions that your uncle held. We've been looking at the way you were talking about the conventions. We were looking at some photographs of all the people that were out there at the Giant Rock. It's amazing. I wanted to ask you. And this is very interesting. When I was talking about Oppenheimer, I was referring to a book that your uncle wrote called The Council of Seven Lights.
Yep.
And I just found that today. And it was on Scribd, and I was able to download it as a PDF, and I started reading it. And what you're saying about your uncle being a reluctant messiah and not, why me, I can see that in this book. it it's so bizarre. Well, not really bizarre, but it's so unusual and makes such perfect sense that in the book he's talking that God created the universe and he created the earth and the humans on the earth and created the other humans on the other planets, which makes perfect sense, which leads us to what your uncle said about them being here with us.
Right.
Which is highly intriguing because in the book he says that they told him that one of their people was responsible for the development of the atomic weapons, which made me think that either Oppenheimer or maybe Einstein were one of them.
And incredibly, it's funny. You get into hominoids, which is really interesting thing too. I think that there's some correlation between that and. You know, I try not to mix apples and oranges, and it's funny. My uncle used to do that a lot. He'd make a tremendous, great arguments as far as religion and science. But we have a thing called everyone knows about what is referred to as the Watchers. Those who came down and they're referred to as demons, came down and had sexual relations with the daughters of men. Which it's Old Testament stuff. It's actually both Arab, what's the Muslim faith and the Quran, all that. It's in both texts, and actually in some of the Jewish texts also too, the Hebrew text. Okay, so here's the evidence of them actually bleeding so severely even today, because the Arab women have burqas, the traditional thing. They are not allowed to show their face. Well, that was the protection because the so-called watchers or aliens or whatever would come down and have sexual relationships and breed with the with the daughters of men. And then, of course, that goes back, which again, it makes sense. I mean, as far as that. So you get into this hominoid thing, or I believe that's the correct word, where you've got this mixture. And I actually think that they're, and in biblical, everyone, with even Eve, you got Adam and Eve, and then you've got, Mary and what have you, as far as God coming over, in her sleep and what have you. That makes a case for what you're just saying. And because the intelligence is so advanced and they're almost used as vehicles or channels to do this. You talk about Einstein, you're getting into the Manhattan Project and things like that, and time travel and what have you. The brilliance of all of these things at these given times was so great in comparison to whatever the school of thought of the day. It wasn't a skip and a hop. You talk about a quantum leap. It was so far advanced, and they're even today they're proving it that they talk about wormholes, they talk about time travel things that, which give credence and credibility to all of this so-called mystery, which has been nothing but a glorified cover-up for most of our lives, and because they didn't want governments by and in caste systems, which we actually have one. We have the haves and the have-nots. But by tradition, they want to keep as many people in the dark as possible. Just makes sense. I mean, because the more and this whole, I remember the movie Sneakers. As far as the new capital, the capital that's always been is information. Which again, it all fits with all this stuff. But we've all been blinded. There have been actual direct communications between over in England with Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt. They were having a huge, during that time period, during the war, the various people, and they called them Foo Fighters, whenever there was any damage to the planet Earth, and incidentally, after any nuclear above-ground explosion, get droves of UFO activity. With the huge amount of bombing, you get droves of UFO activity. I mean, it's off the map. So there's so what happens, in this whole, scheme of things is there are people out there who have a deep connection with Mother Earth, who don't want to see it destroyed. And Bruce Cathy in his book, he made the premise that there's a way to split atoms, but they have to be almost at a precise time and place and coordinates in order to do it. That you just can't launch nuclear weapons pell-mell, like hitting a switch, which everyone has, which because of this presence of these UFO and extraterrestrials. And what's recently been coming out, which all these Air Force silo dwellers, that were in there, they're all coming out with books, even against all the powers that be, and all the disclosure statements they signed, whereas they were told to push switches, they hit them, nothing happened. So there's something there. And, so as far as when you ask about the combination of Oppenheimer or Einstein or some of these, way above my pay grade of being able to even understand most of the stuff anyways. But you just have to assume that there's something unique and divinely special about some of these people in our history.
Wow. That's a very powerful statement right there.
Yep.
And I have to agree. I have to agree with you. From what I've learned about your uncle, I'm just stunned. I really am. I've heard of him before, and my friend who used to be a MUFON field investigator, he was unbelievably excited to hear that you're coming on the show tonight to talk about this stuff. I mean, he said, you got to talk to this guy because he's going to give you the straight stuff. I wanted to go back to what you said about Eisenhower. And while you were talking about it, I was recalling that about 2.5 to 3 years ago, I had a fellow on the show, and I can't remember his name, and he's probably going to be really upset that I can't remember his name because I haven't heard from him in a while. But he was on, and we were talking about someone we got on the subject of Eisenhower and the UFOs, and he was telling me about how he actually knew somebody that was on scene when Eisenhower met with the aliens at an Air Force base out west.
The Edwards?
Yep.
I think it was Edwards.
I think it was too. And he said, yeah, I know that guy. And I said, you got his phone number? Yeah. So I put the show on hold, and we called the guy, and he came on the show for an hour or so and talked to us that night about Eisenhower. And what you were saying about your uncle, George Van Tassel, knowing the Eisenhowers, and then the COINTELPRO people getting involved. And then all of a sudden your uncle becomes person non grata with the Eisenhowers. And then you have to think about the military-industrial complex speech that Eisenhower gave just before he left office. And I have to wonder if all of that isn't connected.
It is connected. In fact, my uncle was he'd done a radio show actually, and he says, "Well, I'm going to go talk to the president." As far as it was like a matter of fact. I mean, it wasn't. He was. And so we can push the disclosure. Even back then, it was all about disclosure, letting everyone know. And shortly thereafter, Eisenhower denied that he had ever had talked with him. But here's the thing too. We know for a fact that he did. That actually he talked regularly with Eisenhower. But not only, but it was Mamie Eisenhower. That is how that all started out. And then all of a sudden it was an abrupt. It was and they were kind of. And my uncle was very dumbfounded because I guess he made the mistake of thinking that, all men were created equal in the United States, or that he was one of the club, and he didn't. But he was very vocal about talking to Eisenhower and the Edwards incident, that he was there, and it was him that arranged the meeting between the alien groups and Eisenhower. So that's where the whole thing. And then there actually here's the other thing too. There's some trippy stuff going on. One of the things that is that they created a law that it's against the law to communicate with a extraterrestrial. They made it actually a law, and they put it on the Federal Register. It's hilarious.
What a bunch of maroons.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't mean to start
a year in jail without a trial, and a fine. Well, for years everyone knows that, everyone knows that, they completely denied the existence of all this stuff. And then I often wonder, well, why'd you create a law if it doesn't exist? But anyways, I digress. Okay, so
No, you're not digressing. That's
yeah, I digress. Well, either they are. It's funny. Some of the pictures. I didn't. I knew this one guy. He was actually, I forget what his name was too, and I can't remember what his name was. He was a general, but he was the head of Project Blue Book, and we were looking at some old photographs. I was with this other guy who's really, he's far gone. He ought to be institutionalized as far as the whole UFO incident. It's like 24/7. I'll get emails and conversations. It's just, I keep on wanting to tell him that, maybe you need to take some medication or something. I think you need to be careful. You're getting too. But he says, I found a picture with this general that was out at the convention in civilian clothes, and he was the leader of Project Blue Book at the time. And I should remember his name, but I don't. And and he was so excited. He says, "You know what that guy is?" I go, "No." He goes, "That was General so and so." But anyway, which comes to, I guess the one thing as far as why do we need to make this film? Well, one, obviously it's interesting material, and it's exciting material. It's a time of discovery here, and it's been hidden, and that is what there's been a lot of there's been the X-Men and this and this, and it fascinates me how this story has remained kind of in the dark. And I started to think about it, about the why, and listen, let me tell you something. From wherever, I have had the most strange occurrences with my uncle after his death. Essentially, kind of urging me, emphatically urging me to do something and to do this. And I didn't know whether it's me talking to myself or whatever, but there's been so many instances. And I was always trying to figure out, why? Why me? I'm on the same page. Why? Of course, there's. I believe it's $1 billion franchise. I think it's extraordinary. I think there's the potential is right up there with anything else. Just on the subject matter. But I couldn't figure out why it wasn't being done. And the thing that comes back to me is that there's very few people even living. That I had I guess I didn't think so at the time. I had the privilege of living out in the middle of the desert and witnessing a lot of the stuff, but there's nobody else. And then the other thing is there's not anyone who could, within our family, who could articulate this story, to give it some meaning and some context to what really was going on. So the irony is I'd never written a screenplay. I'd done a few things, but I'd never written a screenplay. God, sitting down up there, what took me 2 years to do. And I was at first having a lot of trouble getting it, how is it, it's not a I don't want to do a documentary, and I don't want to write a book because, documentaries put you to sleep. In books, we may get, you could get 50,000, people. So it came down to writing a screenplay. It was the most logical thing to do to reach the most people and to give this what we call the greatest UFO story never told, and to give it the wide breadth that it certainly deserves. And but initially I was having a hard time figuring out which way to do this. And I tell you what, is like a voice listening to you. I was told just start writing this thing, let the chips fly where it goes, because I was worried about some of the things like my uncle, I mean, he, like I said before, he liked the women. I mean, and there are a lot of women out there that he was involved with, which doesn't, but then, we think about in terms of, Jack Kennedy and Martin Luther King, even Dwight Eisenhower. I mean, it just seems these very powerful men seem to do that, which, a lot of people, but I was always kind of in a protective phase. I wanted to, make him a hero, and he told me to, in whatever way he was communicating with me, he just told me to get off it. He says, write it the way you want it. He says, people will hear the message, and what they'll do is they'll enjoy it. You make it enjoyable. They'll go to the internet. They'll figure out some of the stuff, and that way you'll do a lot more good doing it that way versus having a limited audience. And really, what I wanted to do with the movie is, I know I speak to the believers of what we want. What my goal is to do is to open up or get the scales off the linear minds that seem to be running things down into the ground, and hopefully, again, through his work and through inspire people to think out of the box, because we have trillion-dollar deficits. We have, there's so much. We are such a critical state in the world, not just here, but the world, that we're again at that place where we need to start thinking out of the box and start doing something a little different. So I thought, well, this would be the way. But then I got along, I started looking at demographics of people who either had experienced abduction or believed in, life out there in the universe and other universes and things like that. And the numbers are staggering. There was a study done out of Harvard, and, they fought tooth and nail as far as the, how the study was performed. But from what I see in that one study that they'd done regarding abductions, they did so many qualifying questions that I'm surprised anyone got past any of, as a qualified candidate of someone who had actually had abduction experience. Well, as it turns out, their initial findings were over, well over 1 million people in the United States alone have actually had physical UFO abductions.
Huh.
It's staggering.
That's a staggering number.
It's crazy. So here I am. I'm sitting around that. Okay, then we get into the actual people who believe. It's something like, I guess, in excess of 65% of people unequivocly believe that there are extraterrestrials, that they are visiting here, and what have you. So I thought, well, this would probably be a good. Not only it'd be a good idea to get this thing done. Now, it being easy. Hell, this is not easy. You have to deal with people, personalities, greed. And this subject matter. I've had a lot of people interested, but I had one group tried to turn this thing into I hope they meant well. Out of Hollywood, some people out of the Warner Brothers, and they were trying to turn my screenplay into a Indiana Jones Temple of Doom. Well, so I had to put my foot down and say, listen, let's wait a minute here. It's wonderful that you're going to, provide some of the money and you're going to do all this stuff for me, but we can't screw with the subject matter here, because it has a reason, even in its own state, and even with the dramatic license that I've taken to provide continuity. It's a jewel, and I don't want, we've already went down the Indiana Jones, and we went down the Star Wars and this and that, which, all of them are good, but it's not Giant Rock the movie. So, even a few months ago, my gosh, I thought I was in World War III. Finally, I literally had to let them go because of this stuff, and so we brought on new staff, and we're on the best track and what have you, and so we're reformulating our our plans and what have you. But having said that, people don't fight over things that don't have any perceived value. So, in one respect, it's good. And everyone that's read the screenplay, and they're Chris Christopherson, who signed a letter of intent, he loves it. And I asked why, and he said that I believe in this shadow government that it exists. He says, I've always believed in extraterrestrials. He says, and this needs to be done. And so I thought, okay, well, no, kind of through hell or high water, we're going to get this thing done. So at any rate, that's a little bit of, I guess, background. But we're happy with the screenplay. We're happy with the material. I'd like to, there's room for people who want to make some money, to participate, but it's going to be done, and it's going to be done pretty much, the way it should be done. So from that respect, I'm happy, and it's great to wake up every day and work on the project, and it's certainly great to be able to, to come on your show and talk about it, because the thing about it, all this stuff's in my head, and I kind of need to process some of this stuff out too. So I love some of the questions you've asked.
Well,
and as far as this,
I appreciate that, and I can tell you're just. I can tell when somebody really, really is into and really loves the subject that they're working with, and that comes through so clearly with you. I mean, it's almost as if you can't get the words out fast enough that, you just want to impart this knowledge. And I am fascinated that Chris Christopherson, of all people, signed that letter of intent, because you just don't see him in a lot of work anymore. Obviously he's an older person now, and I know he was in a made-for-TV miniseries called America, and I think that was on ABC.
Yeah,
and I watched that regularly, and his character in that was very powerful. And it's interesting what you said about him believing in the shadow government that we all know exists. Thank you very much. And I suppose they're going to cut us off at any moment now and shut the show down. Thank you for that. But it's amazing that Chris Christopherson. Did he come to you, or did you put out a call for actors? And who do you have as the lead roles? Is there anybody signed up for the lead roles?
Well, we had one. One of the tragedies that came up with this whole thing is that there are. We had the origin of it was, I have a home down in Mexico, and one of my neighbors was an actor, and we were really great friends, and he was pretty much bringing in a lot of the Hollywood people, as far as that goes. So he was really part of the Hollywood group that went, that left us. I didn't fire anybody, but they decided, well, either you do this or we're going to go. And so I said, well, wish you a lot of luck, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, it was through him, and then this is also the threat. This is amazing stuff. You learn new things every day. He says, well, I'm taking Chris Christopherson with me, and I said, well, that's too bad. And so I called up Chris Christopherson. He goes, I'm not going anywhere.
I could just hear his voice now in my head, him saying that. I'm not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere. He goes, he doesn't speak for me. I said, I just need to find out. I said, I was very, very, very humble about it. I said, I'm sure sorry to bother you, but you get an iconic name like Chris Christopherson, you can think, well, I better follow this thing through. It's not that. But anyways, these I'm not going. So it's kind of funny, but yeah. We're going to go after some really, they're called A-list actors.
Right.
One of the, there's several people that that we're in the process of contacting, and I either they want the job or not, as George Van Tassel, because that's the I actually think the role of George Van Tassel is probably one of the juiciest, most profound roles that have come along in Hollywood for a long, long time. Not because it's my family, not because I wrote the screenplay, because I just know. I've had people tell me what this is. So we're not bashful about contacting actors, and I'm not saying whether we have or not, but the caliber of Matt Damon as George Van Tassel, Russell Crowe and as George Van Tassel. So, you know, and some of this stuff is in the works. And there's actually a love interest, you know, in the screenplay, and we're not bashful about contacting someone like Penelope Cruz or Eva Mendes, you know, to play a love interest of him. There is going to be probably 4 or 5 A caliber list actors. You know, we're in discussion as far as who would be the most perfect for various roles, because we're casting for things like Howard Hughes, which is actually going to be in the film, and so you know, there are some very, very juicy roles, you know, as far as that goes. That I believe that will really not only that enhance our show, enhance the whole presence, because you know, you get into things, issues of bankability, and you know, when you get into distribution, you know who's on the marquee. You know, well, one of the things we've got, a good anchor person with Chris Christopherson. That's a great start. We'll have others, and most people love this. Russell Crowe had his own UFO experiences. Matt Damon, free energy. Free and renewable energy buff, as far as this stuff goes. So it really fits with some of these people's personal lives. So it's not, like I said, we're not real bashful about, asking them to, actually probably, making a few $1 million and being in a movie. So, but we're that's in the works. We'll see what happens, and there's all kinds of things, but there's going to be some good actors as far as, really great actors. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm sure you have too, most of the movies that are coming out, especially in the UFO genre or in the sci-fi thing, you get like, they're really stupid. I mean, what's come out is some really stupid movies, movies that make no sense and have no soul. They seem to be relying way too much on special and visual effects. We're going to have all that, of course. Crap. We're going to have. Excuse me. We're going to have all kinds of UFOs and ships and things like that, and surreal episodes and all that stuff. But the underlying theme is this is about real people, real events with a soul. Movies like Oblivion, Pacific Rim, Transformers, all of this nonsense that's out there, they give you one heck of a ride, but you get 10 feet out of the movie theater and you forgot what you watched. And you forgot what you watched, you forgot what the thing was. You went on a great ride, and that's what their job is. But Giant Rock, the movie, is special because not only are we going to give you the ride of your lifetime, but we're going to give you a wheelbarrow full of stuff to think about, and to question. And so that's, there's a lot of things that are very gratifying to be involved with this thing here. I mean, yeah, hey, listen, I like making money just like, that's my, my earthly thing is I like making money too, and the movie's going to do well and make a lot of people a lot of money. But there's this underlying thing as far as both an artist and a filmmaker and a creator or something like this, again, that just makes it. I'll walk on coal. I'll take a Tony Robbins lesson and learn how to walk on coals for this thing here. As far as this, whatever I have to do. So.
While you were talking there about those other movies, the only one that I can think of that has come out recently that you get more than 10 feet away from it and you still think about it, and it's going to sound really stupid to say this, but one of the reasons I keep my Netflix account is so I can keep watching these series of movies over and over, and that's The Avengers.
Oh, the Avengers? Oh, yeah, sure. No,
there's definite.
I'm on the same page.
Yeah, there's so much character development there in those characters that Stan Lee created, and it sounds to me like that's sort of the same thing that you're doing. And as far as Howard Hughes goes, you got to get Leonardo DiCaprio to play Howard Hughes because he is Howard Hughes.
Yeah, well, actually, we thought about Leonardo DiCaprio as George. We actually did because he's got such a broad range, and we've got to bring. We start off with a young George in the 30s, and then we take him all the way to 63. So we got to age him. But we thought, and again, Leonardo DiCaprio, same thing. I mean, very, very environmentally and renewably energy conscious. Would do that. We thought about him. I think he's great. Yeah, but it's funny that you mentioned the Avengers because when you talk about character development, you feel like you own those characters. When you're sitting there watching the Avengers, when you have empathy, you feel like you're a part of that character, and that's one thing. And it's because of the tentpole economics of having these large animated and there's several factors too. Number one, if you have cartoonish type films, then they're easily translatable to foreign languages. Chinese and Russian don't get Ben and Jen in a room in a love comedy. That doesn't. But you get animation, visual, et cetera, and it's easily and right now the foreign markets. It used to be you gave away your foreign rights in order to get a distribution deal. Now it's almost vice versa. Huh. You say, hey, take the North American. There's several movies that have been doing reversing the trend as far as the economy, the economics of a film. One of them was Life of Pi, which it did 4 foreign to 1 North American as far as so there are reasons for it. I mean, as far as that goes. But if you can hit this, well, we only call it a quinella or a trifecta. A movie with based on true events. A movie with a soul and something that is visually exciting and has let's call that the superfecta. It has a universal message. You've achieved something, and that's what we're going to fight like. And the fight's already begun. Over some of this stuff, the stakes were so high with some of these. I'm thinking, where in the hell do you come from? We've literally had. Heck, I was actually threatened because I wasn't. As far as, and I'm thinking, this is the movie business. But again, I guess the fight is if something's of value, then of course I guess it's maybe worth going to those extremes. I don't think so, but the truth of the matter is that's what we want to do, and I think I believe that we're not going to compromise on any of this stuff. We're going to we have this vision. And I've lived because I'm a writer director. The issue is I've directed 2 small films, 5-minute shorts, but I know these characters firsthand. They are, and so I know every shot, every setup, how it's supposed to go from the jets buzzing the outhouses out the rocks and having the guy's hair toupee get partially blown off. The vision and the idea of each scene and how they're connected, there's a cadence. And that's the benefit of being writer/director versus, here, I would not let anyone else direct this. It wouldn't matter if Ronnie Howard came and said, hey, I'd like to direct this. They don't have it. They don't have the connection. They may think they do, and they're all great. God, listen, I'm a film student. I love some of his work. Francis Ford Coppola. I love all these guys. Stanley Kubrick. Just brilliant stuff. But this is different, and this is so odd because and it's spectacularly odd because it's just different, and it's almost this thing here. And of course, some people may deem that I'm a little bit too passionate, if there is such an animal. But this is not your ordinary. This has. We used to say that in some of our meetings. I said, this is much more than a movie. And that's what we kind of pretend that we keep telling ourselves that, this is much more than a movie. This is much more than a movie. We keep on thinking, but I just believe that. I believe that, the message is big. So anyway, that's kind of maybe sounds cliche, but I guess I can take that liberty.
No, that doesn't sound like a cliche. It sounds like you believe in the product. You're telling the story of your own family. I mean, damn it, who could do that? You.
Me.
You know your family. You obviously have the passion for it. Now, let me ask you a question. Since you're obviously not going to compromise on the integrity of the film, is there room for small investors to invest in the film?
Absolutely.
To get a piece of the action?
We've had some backing. Two wonderful women, God bless women. They, I had, when I'd finished the screenplay, I read it for them, and they go, this thing is going to be a success. She says, anyways, they got the ball rolling, and they wrote me a check for $100,000. I was astounded. I really was. I mean, I was just astounded. So it's really started from, small things. There's been a lot of promises along the way, but this thing is going to get done, and if it takes $5,000-$10,000 investment, so be it. Who cares? It's going to get done. So, and the smaller investor, I think, will be able to leverage themselves at a ridiculous amount. Certainly, there's risk. I mean, there's risk in everything we do. But as far as the opportunity and the chance to be involved in something of this scale, I mean, it's equivalent to basically partnering up and having a horse at the Kentucky Derby. Would you kick in $5,000 or $10,000, to have the opportunity to have a horse run at the Kentucky Derby? I'd sell a car to do it. So there's a lot of opportunity. And the other thing too is that the smaller investor, they know people, and our biggest thing too is not only we want as many people to know about this, because if there are more people that know about it, that's less money that we'll have to spend on P&L. As far as print advertising and things like that, which, if it's a word of mouth thing and we get a lot of people, so if you've got $5,000 in this thing, or even 10 or 50 or whatever you've got, you're going to tell everybody at least I would think, to go, when the movie comes around, go buy a $10 ticket. Yeah. And believe you me, that grows exponentially, and that is really how a lot of really good movies actually evolved, have come into being. One of the things too, like The Help, that was done that way. I mean, it was just initially it was kind of bootstrapped, and then all of a sudden it got legs, and it went in that direction. But we're set up for them. We're set up for the smaller investor. We need them to be patient, because what the truth of the matter is I'm gonna tell them exactly what's going on. If they call me or email and say, hey, what's going on? What are you doing here? And say, I'll tell them. I mean, so this is not, it's not for the, let's say this is not for the weak-hearted.
Definitely not. It's kind of like,
I mean, I have to disclose and say, hey, but
it's kind of like investing in silver. You might lose your butt like I have.
You know what I did? Speaking of silver, I bought a gold mine with silver options.
Oh, excellent.
I did. Yeah. No, I bought silver. Oh yeah. I mean, I bought silver I bought silver. I think it was, I bought the December calls for $6, and this is in '93, and I'm trying to remember exactly where I got in, but I think it was around $2.85. And I listened to a guy. He made such an elaborate case for investing in silver at that time period. He says historically, you'll never ever get this low. He says it's going to go up. you got to do this, and I did, and actually that's what I ended up doing. I ended up buying a gold mine up in Alaska with my silver options.
Cool.
Actually, yeah, and I was but yeah, I mean, I've had. Incidentally, I've had very serendipitous moments, one of which was when I sold my options. Everyone was saying that I had the $6 calls, and everyone was telling that silver at the time was going to go up to $9 or $12. Well, it didn't. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, and I sold everything. It turned out I was luckily I hit the top, but it had nothing to do with any science. And nothing. It had me. I don't care. I'm selling these things. That was it. So, but yeah.
Yeah,
leverage leverage in this whole thing here. You buy shares in the company, and well, we've had a long track record of being around, of surviving. I went through 2 oil and gas crashes. I had a lot of assets, in the 80s, and then in 1986, Ronald Reagan made a deal with the Saudi Arabians and traded military weapons, and then for them dumping all the oil that they had when oil went from $30 to $6.50 a barrel.
Yeah.
And so I got wiped, but we've always kept the company going, and as far as this, we stay away from a lot of debt, and but a lot of people have made a lot of money with me, in the past. I mean, I've done some investment banking, and I have a very good track record of both staying out of trouble and keeping it alive, and keeping it going as far as this. But to tell you the truth, Bill, I have never seen anything within my career that offers this kind of leverage and opportunity. And this is not a Hollywood film deal. This is real, regular accounting with regular people, not expensing yachts. And the other thing too, one of the biggest problems that Hollywood has is how the Hollywood system goes. I mean, it's almost like but we're not in that world. I mean, as far as, and I won't play that. I did a lot of research before I got into this thing, and I look, I said, God, how can I saw an article which said Men in Black finally broke even at $550 million. And I'm thinking, how do you break even at $550 million? That makes no sense at all. Well, you get into some of the details, and you just sit back and laugh that they get away with it because they do. But it's part of that thing. Plus, Hollywood now more so than, before is just a place where you go pick up an award. It's really, it could be in Atlanta, it could be in Texas, New Mexico. Heck, Breaking Bad was done in New Mexico. A lot of places, they're doing a lot of different things. So it's changing, but what isn't changing is the need for everyone to be entertained, and that isn't changing. That's growing exponentially, and with the various applications that are being introduced, you can download a movie on your cell phone and take the chip out and put it on, pay $1 for it, take the chip out, stick it on your big screen TV, and then you've got so the applications keep growing exponentially. So the future is really good, and it is changing. And the other thing people should realize is in Hollywood, they don't know jack. they claim they do. They don't, and that's one thing as far as my own education dealing with some of these people. They don't know anything. I mean, people know what a good heartwarming film is. They know what things, people know. They think they know everything. They don't know anything. I mean, they really don't. And it's not rocket scientists. With the new technology, cameras, they're called moving pictures. That's right. What they are. You're telling a story through a series of moving pictures. You throw in some special effects, some animation, and some music, but you've got to have the core story first. You can't. There's no substitute for a well-written, well-told story. There isn't. So and people will buy it. So yeah, there's. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I'm always right now. Through the years, our participation has been small, but we've had like about right now we have a little over 500 shareholders, and they've been pretty good. I've had people make a lot of money through me. They buy and sell the stock. It depends on where you're at. If you buy something for $1 and you can sell it for $4, do it. Take the money. So anyway,
now, I've had a question come in here, and if somebody's interested in investing in the movie, sending you taking their piggy bank and wanting to invest in the movie, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, our website is www.giantrockthemovie.com, or just email me directly, chad@giantrockthemovie.com. We have an offering memorandum. We'll send it to you. Read it over. It'll give you, and I got to forewarn everybody, it'll give you 1,000 reasons not to do it. Okay, it'll tell you what, but I'm required to do it. But and then we'll pick up a conversation. We'll get a conversation. I talk to everybody that comes in this thing, and I tell them, and I make sure that they understand the risks, the rewards, the setbacks, et cetera, et cetera. But again, it's definitely worth a shot. This is something that I really, really feel fantastic about.
That's good. It really shows through. Now, I have one last question for you before we end the show, and we can go a few minutes over because it's my show and my network. I'm allowed to do that if I want to. One of the things that I came up with when researching your uncle is something that was called Project Looking Glass. And it appears that after your uncle died, there were certain elements of the quote-unquote shadow government that removed his equipment and whatnot. And it appears to be related to something called Project Looking Glass. What do you know about that? Yeah,
what I know about, at his, and we were perplexed because we didn't know. There was two things. He died in Santa Ana, okay, at a hotel room, and it was really a cheap hotel room. He had no connection out there at all, and essentially it was about, I believe about 75 miles away from the rock. And, at that time, distances, that was pretty far distance for him to be away. And he had a checkup before he had died. He had died of a heart attack in there, and they found him. They couldn't figure out why he was there. They found him the next day. The body was stinking and all that stuff. But a month before, he had sent his newsletter out, the proceedings, and Looking Glass was a part of the operational. He was waiting and continually channeling to get certain components and technology for the Integratron, and the Project Looking Glass was a part of the longevity. All the thing was for molecular and cell regeneration and time travel. Okay, that was the whole premise. And a month before he died, he came out and he told people had bought the proceedings for 15 years, and people donated money and was for research, what have you. So he was extraordinarily excited. Now this was against the backdrop of about 4 years of some severe depression, of not going anywhere. Anyways, so he said, "I've got it." Well, then. And this is the best of my knowledge, and this is what I got out of it. And then he died mysteriously. Had a checkup earlier, was in good shape. Didn't know why. He was still older, but they couldn't figure out why. And the autopsy couldn't figure out why. They didn't know how he died. They really did. They claimed it was a heart attack, but they really didn't. It didn't manifest in the same direction. But the day before they found his body, the doors were kicked into his office and all the files were stolen. They were all gone.
So that happened before he died.
Nothing. Yeah. And so, yeah, and you got to, my family, the other reason I'm doing it is, I'm a little bit more worldly than the rest. Our family was, they were not highly educated, and they're very simple people, but no one could figure out why someone would do that. It didn't make any sense. Nothing made any sense about that. So we believe it had to do with Project Looking Glass, and which is time travel. And along with the molecular and the cellular restructuring of the longevity machine, there was another component which would allow you to time travel. Okay, that's what it was. So yeah, from there, I could only. I mean, that's the best. That's the best I know of that.
That is that is a subject all onto its own. To be honest with you, I mean that. I assume that sort of thing is going to be part of the movie too.
Yes, we've got. Yeah. You know what? Some of the people are not going to look real good. Let me tell you something. Chris Christopherson, he's going to look very cruel. But there's some people within the there's going to be some people that are going to be justly made to look like idiots.
Well, oddly enough, that's the name of the show as well. So you're on the right show for that.
That's right. But anyways, but it is a pushback. And I haven't had, we have not been able to, and this is really, I mean, my uncle, they're trying to, a lot of people, a lot of various reasons, there's competition within the whole UFO community.
Oh yeah.
But they have not treated him well. He carried the banner, he carried the mantle for a whole group of people that took a bunch of abuse for doing nothing other than stating what they believed was the truth. There is no place in this world for that kind of behavior. And this is, in a sense, this is a part of why, this is a pushback, because you can't, that should never be allowed. And his contribution should have been embraced. It should have been something special, but instead persecution, possibly death. No, you know what? We'll let the chips. I've had people telling me, "So are you afraid of this or so?" I say, I'm not afraid of nothing. I mean, as far as this, I mean, I'm so bound and determined. This is going to get done. It's the right and just thing to do. I mean, that just is. I mean, and every once in a while, we all get a chance to push back a little bit.
Yeah,
this is what I'm taking.
That's what I try to do on this show. Give them a little give me a little bit of pushback.
Yeah,
you're screwing with us out here in the country. We're going to start screwing you right back.
Keep them honest.
Yeah,
keep
exactly.
Them honest.
Well, we've gone past that point at this juncture.
Yeah.
One last question before I let you go, and you just sort of touched on that. Have you had any encounters with, say, various the Men in Black? Comes to mind. Any encounters? Do you expect any? Have there been any rumblings about that? Whether or not they're going, anybody is going to try to shut you down? Andrew Breitbart, you maybe?
Yeah, I heard that from a producer that had gotten some message from some guy that said that I didn't know who I was messing with. In this, out of the shadows, which, and I said, well, that's good. Tough. The Men in Black people, I could never put my hand on what was going on with some of the stuff. I've had some very odd stuff happen, but I have no proof. So, as far as that, but the one I did heard is that, I didn't know I was, you don't want to be stirring this up, all the other stuff. You know what? Sorry. It's going to be stirred up.
Yeah. We've had, on this show, we've had instances of that as well.
Yeah.
Well, because some of the people that I talk to are not controversial, but they have their own opinions, and they are not going to back down from their opinions. And I have the same opinions, and we've had very strange things happen during the show, after the show. But I mean, what can you do? What
can you do?
They're going to try to shut us down. They're going to try to kill us. That's the way it is.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. I think we're, we talked briefly a little bit about this. We're a little older, and I don't care what I'm going to speak my truth, and obviously you are. That's what you do also. It's a lot different when you're, and my family, my kids are raised. It's a little different when you're 55 versus when you're 30.
Yeah.
The path is already laid. It's been laid for me from up above, through relatives, et cetera, et cetera. It's already been laid out for me. I'm just going to walk down the path. Now, hey, I believe, you have to have faith that you're going to come out on the other end. You're going to have faith that things are going to work out. But you know what? It is what it is. And I understand that this information, this material, it's very powerful. It really is. But it's a power for good. And I think that regardless of what they're going to do, monkey around with the computer, monkey around with the phones, all that stuff, play the games. I just say spin the wheels. Do what you're going to do. But, we're going to do what we're going to do.
You know what, Chad? Here at the end of the show, before I let you go, I want to say very seriously that I am going to pray for you, and I also pray that God blesses you in your work.
Thanks. I do deeply, deeply appreciate that. I really, and I need it. I absolutely need it. And I think I've gotten this far because of others that have done exactly the same thing, and I really appreciate it, Bill.
Yeah, and I'm gonna research some more about your uncle and see what else I can find out, and send you what input I have by email, and maybe I can come up with something that'll help you out. Who knows?
We'll keep in touch.
Okay, excellent. Listen, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay, have a good evening, and we'll be in touch.
All right, Bill.
All right,
thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Chad C. Meek, the producer, director, the brains behind the new movie, Giant Rock, the movie. You can go to giantrockthemovie.com, giantrockthemovie.com. They are on Facebook. He's all over the place. It is just such an interesting subject, and I think I can say at this point that I'm honored that he joined us with the information that he has. His uncle was a real piece of work, and a very, very intelligent man. And you got Howard Hughes and the government and the military pilots and everybody else involved in it, and you've got a combination for, I think, an excellent movie franchise, something that could very well, and this is going to sound weird to say it, could very well rival that movie that we saw a few years ago, The Avengers. Because that's the kind of movie that just, those characters that Stan Lee invented and are in that movie, he's given flesh to the comics and to the legends of them. And I think that's what Chad is going to do, is he's going to put flesh onto the legend of his uncle, George Van Tassel. And that's pretty much where we're going to leave it for tonight. This show will be up on YouTube. It will be in the archives over at Spreaker. It will be on various podcasting stations. And also, don't forget, at USSA Michigan, the notes, the links, and the audio version of the show will be at USSA Michigan. If not tonight, then sometime tomorrow morning, because this is a big one, and I've got all my notes here that I'm going to include with it, because what I do is when the guest is on, I'm busy typing notes while they're talking, and it helps keep my brain on track for the subject matter. And I will also say, everybody, please be safe. It is this storm is stretching over 1,000 miles wide. It is a brutal storm. I heard from Andy Peacher earlier today. This storm that we have right now here in the United States, this same storm is going to hit them in England on Tuesday. It's going to go right across. They're projecting it to go right across the ocean by the jet stream, and it is going to whack Europe and the UK, Scotland, all those countries over there. So keep everybody in your prayers. That's all I can say. And my name is Belzam. Thank you all so much for watching and listening to the show. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you, and have a good evening. Have a good week. We will see you next Saturday.